Hello, my early viewers, and welcome to Grading Equity. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm not really sure. Let me stop sharing my screen for 1 second, and let's go back and make sure everyone can hear and see me. Matter of fact, let's do that before I start. Let me go to the chat feature. If you can give me a thumbs up. This is probably the most unique presentation because there's actually no feedback whatsoever, no audience laughter, cringing. So if I could just get a text from someone to let me know that you can hear me, you can see me, I'll share my screen and we'll get it going. All right, perfect. Looks like we're recording. I got a thumbs up from there. All right, perfect. All right, let's go ahead and start sharing the screen. And hopefully you can see this presentation. Hopefully it just pulled up for you guys. Well, hello and welcome. My name is Jason Saint-Amand, and I am head of the middle school here at the Village School of Naples. And today we're going to be talking about something really important, really a passion project of mine, which is really about grading equity. You know, one of the things that schools face all the time that's been such a challenge in the 4 independent schools that I've worked at is how do we truly show academic honesty and assess students? And how does that actually align with the mission and vision of the school? And sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's kind of the poor stepchild that's left to the side of you may have this amazing vision and mission of your school, but then how you actually are grading and assessing students and their performance doesn't match that. And so we've worked hard here at the Village School of Naples for the last 4 years to really hone in on making sure that that does align with the mission and vision of the school. And so what you're about to see is a 4-year journey through the Village School of Naples and how we've done that. So a little bit about myself. This is the shameful page, I suppose, of the whole performance, which is a little bit about me. So my name obviously is Jason Saint-Amand. This is about my 25th or 26th year in independent school education. After about 20, I think most of us try and stop counting and we just say around 20. I've had the pleasure of working at 4 different independent schools in Atlanta, in Hillsborough County at Berkeley Prep, Montgomery Academy in Montgomery, Alabama, and of course here at the Village School of Naples. It's winter is truly set in here. It was about 70, 73 degrees today. So we thought about putting on a sweater here in Naples. Not really sure how we're going to handle that kind of rough weather. For me, I've actually had the pleasure of teaching at all 3 levels, lower, middle, and upper. I actually started as a 3rd grade teaching assistant. And after I failed at that miserably, they decided to move me up to 4th grade. And then from there, I made my journey into the middle school as a history teacher in Atlanta at Woodward Academy for 18 years. And then eventually moved on to the upper school at places like Berkeley Prep, Montgomery Academy, and even here at the Village School of Naples. And I've had, like most of us who've been around this for a long time, a lot of hats that I've worn, whether it was a middle school or upper school history teacher. I was an engineering teacher for a while. They dared me to teach AP computer science with a history background. Not sure how that worked, but the program's still going. So I feel pretty good about that when we started at Berkeley. A technology coordinator in the middle and the upper school, a coach at various levels, had some fundraising experience, especially at Woodward Academy as part of the annual fund and the faculty division, STEAM coordinator, and of course, finally, where I am now. When I started here 4 years ago, I was the middle and upper school principal here at the Village School of Naples. And so, you know, the Village School of Naples is, it's a fairly young school. It's 20 years old. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary. Of course, it had to be in 2020, which is a blessing in some ways. You know, it's a great school. It's a pre-K through 12 with roughly over 500 students. Last year, our upper school celebrated its first graduating class of 12 students. And we're very, very happy about the fact that they get into their first selection for college with a lot of scholarship opportunity, financial offers as well. And so our head of school right now, who's probably here somewhere listening, although it's really hard to tell with the way this whole thing works, Dennis Chapman is our current head of school. He took over 3 years ago from our founding head, Ginger Sauter. And the school has been really blessed in so many ways with great growth. So much so that last year we had to split the leadership of the divisions. And so I had my choice, and thank you very much, Dennis, shameless plug for my boss. for allowing me to pick and choose. The upper school is on a fantastic trajectory. The middle school, like always, a little bit of the poor stepchild, because the emphasis was so much was on the upper, because it was brand new and it was our first graduating class. And so I'm very pleased and happy to be very one-dimensional, if you will, in my mindset of working in the middle school and helping to make that growth and experience for students and teachers even better. A little more background that you probably may or may not want to know. I'm married. My wife is actually the associate head of School of Academics here in strategic planning. She has been a principal as well. So we get to work together, which is a blessing and a curse, depending if she's in the room. I'm not really sure. Just kidding. We have 2 kids. My daughter's a junior in high school. My son's at FSU in his sophomore year. 3 dogs and a Jeep Wrangler my wife thinks I spend way too much time on. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's really dive into grading equity. So first thing, full disclosure, this is a work in progress for us. When we started 4 years ago, asking some really introspective and difficult questions about what was our goal, like what is it that we wanted to achieve? How do we get people involved? What is our current mindset? Where do we want it to be? Does it align with the mission and vision of the school? And that was a very interesting time, because 4 years ago was the final year of our founding head, Ginger Sauter. And then of course you had incoming head Dennis Chapman. And then we're going through a strategic planning process right now, campus master plan. So there's a lot of change. And with that really was the perfect time to start evolving our mindset on grading in school. And so it is a 4-year journey of wonderful and beautiful imperfection. So full disclosure, I do not have all the answers. And I'm going to be checking the chat feature, which I cannot see right now because we're presenting at the end to answer any questions that you guys may have. As always, too, if you want to leave your questions on the HOVA app, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, I've already answered 4 or 5 questions right now, and I can see the chat feature up. So that may be the easier chat feature to use as we go about questions. I see Jody Reeves gave me a thumbs up there, so she can hear me and see me, and that's great. Thank you, Jody, very much. So with that said, you know, the question that we all struggle with is, why is grading so hard? Like what makes it so challenging? And, you know, I've had the pleasure of being part of an amazing growth cycle here at this wonderful school, and have had the ability to participate in hiring over 15 teachers over the last 4 years, with the head of school, of course, and many others. And one of the things that I've always asked, you know, is what is an assessment? What does a quality and accurate and fair assessment of a student's work look like? And the question normally comes back, well, what are you guys doing? Or I've always done this. And then when I pry deeper into, you know, why is it that you grade that way? The question often comes back as, well, that's how I was taught. You know, that's what my teacher said, and that's what my teachers learned. And I had a great experience with this teacher, and I really loved what they did. There's no real great teacher training out there about how to grade. What does effective grading look like? What is fair? What is equitable? And there's some older misconceptions out there that we still see that need to be conquered, like, you know, late work policies or retakes. You know, how is it that we are truly assessing students in a fair way? And is our goal to catch kids in a moment of academic struggle, or is it to actually value learning, which we're going to get to a little bit more? You know, for students, you know, part of this process, by the way, over the last 4 years was having a lot of conversations with teachers, of course, but also with students and parents of, you know, what are grades to you? And for some parents, you know, it's a gateway to the university of wherever they want to go. For others, for students especially, it's a source of identity. Like, I am an A student. You know, just recently I had, and just for disclaimer purposes, there's about 138 kids in the hall outside my door right now. Hopefully none of them will open it. We're going to find out. But for many of them right out there, being an A student or a B student is a source of great identity for them. And now all of a sudden, as the grading gets harder, especially in the middle school, When they move away from that lower school mindset into a more middle school mindset, they struggle with it. That anxiety, that fear really is on the rise because they've always been an A student. They've identified as an A student. And now all of a sudden that may be changing, and that can cause a lot of parent anxiety as well as student anxiety as well. One of the things that we worked hard on is our parent conversations about what does rigor look like? Parents, of course, the end goal for them in a college preparatory school is to get to the university or wherever they want to go. And rigor is important, but they judge rigor and have been, and I'm going to give it to a more finer point on this a little bit later. They judge rigor by what they experienced as well. So when we talk about homework in a little bit, we're going to show you some really interesting viewpoints of that our parents went through, kind of an emotional roller coaster as we changed homework policies over the last 3 years to finally find what we think is the right fit. And then finally, we're, as teachers, it can be grading from classroom to classroom can be vastly different. And sometimes we're often trying to make students conform to a system that doesn't always fit, and I go back, and one of the questions I want you all to consider is do you remember how you first graded students when you first started teaching? So for those of you who are here, obviously it's Administrator Day, you may be heads of school or principals. How did you start? And as a history teacher, for me, I just remember falling in love with a machine some of you may know as the Scantron machine. So normally at this time in a real conference with people in attendance, there may be some chuckles there. If you remember Scantron or even Duplo machines and the blue ink and all that stuff. And Scantron's still around today, and it certainly has its place. But for me, it was ease of grading that I would give, matching, multiple choice, true or false. And in 30 seconds, I could whip that Scantron card right through there. It would make all kinds of snapping, beeping sounds, and then bam, I would have a grade, put it in the grade book, move on to the next assessment. That was easy for the teacher, but was that really a fair and accurate assessment of the knowledge and the mastery that I was asking my students to demonstrate? Obviously, over time, the answer to that is no. Although Scantron will always have a very special place in my heart, I'm not sure of its relevance in daily education and grading practices. We even saw some amazing changes in AP when COVID hit and the world kind of turned upside down a little bit. AP had to really shuffle at the end of last year to really create an online assessment that was not Googleable, that was not something that was easy to cheat on. And we're going to talk about cheating and how some systems are actually there promoting cheating and grading and how to avoid that. But AP had to really create an assessment that was based on application of knowledge, not regurgitation of knowledge. And that was a bit of a game changer. And I hope AP continues with that. I'm not really sure how that's going to go. As I moved into my middle school role, one of the great luxuries is I don't have to worry so much about that, although I do keep my hand in the game a little bit. So I'd be curious to see how AP evolves in this school year when you still have vast amount of schools, especially in the North, who are still online, who are not going back. And you have schools like us and many of you in this room who are doing a little bit of both. You've got distance learners and you've got in-house learners as well. And those names fluctuate on those lists weekly for us. Some of you I know have made a 9-week commitment for that. We do it weekly, actually. So those are some of the reasons I think grading can be really hard for teachers. They're relying on what they knew. They're relying on past habits from previous teachers. They're looking at parent pressure because, hey, this is their definition of rigor and this is what you should be doing. And in the mix of all that, let's not forget the most important part, and that's the students and their anxiety over grades. And you've got a hot topic of conversation when you have a 6th grader in your office as an administrator saying, I'm really stressed out about my math grade at 6th grade. So that really was something that started our journey several years ago, how we can really change this. And again, it's full disclosure, it's a work in progress, but it's going pretty well so far. So one of the questions that I really wanted to get parents involved in was, what are your thoughts on grading? Most of the time parents are not in that process. You hire a teacher, they put together a syllabus, they say, here is how I'm going to be judging your students. Here are my categories, here are my weights. And parents just have to understand that. And on any given day, on a 7-period schedule, that's 7 different teachers, 7 possibly different systems that they have to learn. And to be honest, it was kind of the Wild West of grading. Last year, for example, for us, I'd go into a science teacher's classroom, and that was when I was middle and upper. And one science teacher had 5 categories, another science teacher had 6. I'd go to a math teacher who had 2 categories, a language arts teacher who had 4, all with different titles, all with different ratios of judgment for students. So it was kind of a little bit of the Wild West, if you will, of grading. And that's something we really looked to hone in on as we started this process. And one of the things that we're, as independent schools, and part of obviously FCIS, a lot of us are K-12, and we have some great cross-curricular opportunities here to really show some better consistency whether you're going from lower to middle or middle to upper, and how are you preparing one set of students for the next division is incredibly challenging. So one of the things that we'll talk more about in just a few minutes as these slides continue is how we bridge the gap between lower and middle, and then again middle and upper, using grading as one of those many ways to help prepare kids for the next level, creating some great cross-divisional consistency. We also tackled some very difficult questions of the number of assessments and expectations. And if you break that down into, say, a 9-week grading period, a quarter, or even a semester, what is enough to say that they proved mastery? We struggled over the last several years because some teachers were masters at grading. At the end of a quarter, they could have 20 to 30 different assessments or possibly more. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we had those who, struggled with that a little bit, and they could only produce 5 or 6 assessments. And so the question really became, how much is enough to say you've proved mastery? Some would say, hey, 1 test, you've either proved it or you haven't. Others say, no, I think we can do it in multiple assessments, and maybe we should be doing it in multiple assessments. So you can tell that there's a lot of great conversation, and this is why this is such a process that takes time to evolve. And like I said, we're in our 4th year. We finally feel like we're in a good spot. And believe me, I am going to share exactly what we've done in just a few minutes to give you some concrete ideas as well. So I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were doing as well is, schools talk a lot, especially lower and middle schools, about creating a safe place to fail. But then oftentimes our grading system was the exact opposite. You had a deadline. Your test was on Tuesday. The outcome of that test would be known in a few days, and that will let you know whether you passed or not. And that doesn't necessarily create an attitude or foster an atmosphere where students feel like there's a safe place to fail. Now, certainly we can't do retakes on everything all the time. So that conversation came up as well. How can we assess students? How can we be fair and judge them? We talk about academic honesty here all the time, and rigor, especially as a new young school with its first graduating class. You can imagine that rigor was a big topic of conversation amongst all of our stakeholders. Like, can you get my child into the University of Alabama or Auburn or Florida State or Florida? And how are you going to do that? So rigor was a question, but also how do you marry that with creating a safe place to fail for students with a good number of assessments that challenge them? So one of the things that we really understood, though, was that we're biased in how we grade. We just had to own this. And I asked teachers to really rethink about what bias they have in their grading system. The idea, of course, the end result is we're going to have a student prove mastery in something. But how do we get there without assessing students on things that may not equal knowledge? So we looked at things like participation, effort, organization. Do all those really equal knowledge or mastery of your particular subject? I always go back, and this dates myself a little bit to the movie Summer School with Mark Harmon a long time ago. And one of the first scenes in the movie, when he has this summer school class, a young student walks up and asks for the bathroom key. That dates us all a little bit. He goes to the bathroom. We don't see him until the last 10 minutes of the movie, where he takes the final exam and gets an A and aces the class, having never been in the class the entire summer. I absolutely love that example. But it's a funny example that really highlights that not every student perfectly fits into our plan of what grading should look like in our classroom. And so we had to be mindful, like, of those students who may not be organized, who don't necessarily sit in the front row. And a couple of years ago, I believe it was FCIS, and I forgot the name of the person who actually started the phrase, the game of school. We all have those students who know how to play the game. They sit in the front row, they take really good notes, they test well, they raise their hand, they participate, they're organized. And for a teacher's mindset, that's an easy one-off, like, oh yeah, that's an A student. And chances are they're gonna get an A. But you could have some absolutely brilliant kids who are the most disorganized, disheveled, sit in the back row. They're introverted to a point where they do not want to participate in class, yet they have the ability, just like the front row student, to improve mastery in your class. The difference is they don't fit into the pre-planned program that a teacher may have of how to be successful. So we had to address those internally as teachers. And I'm teaching a class and coaching as well here. So it wasn't like I was just asking teachers to do this without me having to do it as well, about how you grade bias and how do we remove that bias. Like, things for me, one of my pet peeves, organization or participation. We all want students to be participating. That's our perfect student mindset. But we have to realize that you could have some kids who are shy, who are anxious, who are going through some social emotional issues, who may not feel comfortable raising their hand and saying, I know that answer, but yet they're really super smart and they have the chance to really prove mastery. We had to change our system to help apply it to a wider group of kids in our grading, and making categories that are fair and equitable. So when you're looking at things like, do your teachers actually grade on organization? Do they give points away for that? Like, did little Johnny bring his pencil? Will you get a point for that? What message does that actually send to students who may not have a pencil or forget it because their mind is in a different place? It doesn't mean that they're less of a student and should be graded on those different behaviors. And that really is kind of the game of school mentality. So removing bias, incredibly important as you're going through this process. And to be honest, it makes teachers uncomfortable. It forces us to really be really introspective about what we do. And that's why this is a process that takes some time. And for us, we're in our 4th year. So as a school, we had to define for us what is the most important aspect for us as a school. And the answer was, obviously, it was learning. It was learning over grading. A lot of schools get caught up in a number, and they get caught up in the number of numbers. For us, you have to really define what's more important to you. If it's valuing knowledge or grading, and it really has to be, in some regards, one or the other. You can obviously have a little bit of both, but if you're planning how you're going to deploy a grading system across divisions, you have to really answer that question. And then you have to build that system around the answer to that question. And for us, it was really valuing learning and knowledge over just a simple grading system. So we had to tackle questions like, what about late work? Every school, I remember when we started here, the parent-student handbook was about 18 pages long. Now it's about 83, and we can thank some of that to our lawyers. And I can't imagine what some of yours are, which could even be larger, of course. And one of those policies in there is the late policy, right? You know, for us, it's stated in there that it's 3 days, 10% off per day late. And then after that, it's teacher discretion. And we all love vagueness in our handbooks, but we really had to tackle that as a big issue. Like, what if a student did turn it in late, but still knocked it out of the park? Not every student, again, fits into that mold of getting that well organized, turning things in on time, but yet they're still proving mastery. So it is a bit of a juggle for teachers. I'm not going to lie. It's a logistic nightmare at some points. But again, if you go back to what is our end goal, what is the most important aspect of our school, and that's valuing knowledge over grades, then you have to look at your late policy and think of it more as a guideline than a concrete policy. And I know that makes a lot of people twitch a little bit, administrators who love black and white sometimes, and like, hey, this is a simple process, or teachers especially, who keep moving. The curriculum doesn't stop, you know, week after week, it continues. Your goal is to get from A to Z, you know, from August to May or September for some of you. So we even looked at things like extra credit. Like, what does extra credit look like? And a lot of teachers are like, no, I don't want to do extra credit. But, you know, for us, you can still allow extra credit as a way for students to follow a passion that they've got, but still making it rigorous and academically honest. So, you know, we tackled or are tackling the question of extra credit. Should we allow it? Should we not? We're still fighting that a little bit. I don't think any teacher in their heart really wants more work to grade, but yet as educators, our hearts are always there, especially if a student comes to us and says, hey, I really think this is a great idea. Can I try this? And then you're always going to have those students as well who are, hey, my grades are a little low. I noticed we only have one test. Perhaps I can get something else. You can still find a way and use that as a motivating tool for students to prove mastery. And in doing that, what you're actually doing, and I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself, you're really creating motivation for students. And at the same time, you're removing the desire that some have about cheating when they feel that pressure and anxiety, and they feel like, hey, I've only got one assessment left, my grade's not there, I've got to knock this out of the park. That stress and anxiety creates the atmosphere and the opportunity for students to think about, hey, especially now that so many can be online, how can I get around this? How can I get an A? Is cheating an option for me? And that's something you have to find a way to discourage, and you discourage it really by creating more options for students in a different kind of system. So many different topics there that we could spend a whole day on this particular one. Okay, probably one of the first large battles that we faced was the homework battle. You know, when I got here 4 years ago, homework was valued differently. Again, the Wild West of grading, anywhere from 25% to up to 40% of the value of homework. And we know that our kids are busy. They're juggling a lot. There's hardly a student here that I know that just goes home and has free time. They're booked. As independent school kids, they often have more opportunities through the school, or opportunities through a home with their parents, and club sports, or after school tutoring, or dance, or you name it. Our kids are busy, they're booked. And so homework really was our first big battle that we had to undertake. How much is it worth? What is the value of homework? What are parent perceptions versus reality? And let me give you an example of that. So last year, we decided that we would have homework, but that it would not be graded. And we decided across the board, middle and upper school. We did not necessarily do that. Lower doesn't really have that much homework, but for this example, let's just stick with the middle and upper. So we really tackled this issue by just saying, okay, homework is worth 0%. Now, for me, I thought not only would I get a bonus from my boss because all the parents would be happy, I'd be getting lots of thank yous, there would be high fives and hugs in the hall. Principal Saint Amand really brought it home. Thank you so much. And you can already guess by the slight sarcasm of my voice that that was the opposite reaction that we got. So the first thing I saw was a lot of parent emails and phone calls saying, wait a minute, you're not being rigorous enough. My child's coming home and they're not doing anything. Um, so I really dove in deep with parents, had a lot of parent meetings, a lot of conversations one-on-one, like what are you seeing at home? What do you see as the value of homework? What does rigor at home look like when the kid comes home and unpacks their backpack? What do you think should be in there and how long should it take? And for parents, their mindset was really what they went through when they were kids. And if they don't see you coming home with homework, they don't see a few hours, especially at independent school, especially at the high school level, when you're taking multiple AP classes, and you're really vying to get into just a handful of spots at the university of whatever, they wanted to see that rigor at home and they weren't seeing it. So the good side of all this, the upside, was that student stress level went down, parent stress level went up, and then we also saw a correlation though with grades beginning to fall because those moments of practice, which is what homework was meant for, were gone. So you take math, for example, as a classic example. You send a student home, hey, try these 15, 20 problems that we worked on in class as practice. They come back and they haven't done any of them. And the teacher's like, well, we were going to go over them. So now all of a sudden it slowed down the lesson, it slowed down the curriculum, grades started to falter a little bit. Parents were getting stressed. And you can see as an administrator, basically it was like the best day ever, you know? So all jokes aside, it was challenging. And we had to really reevaluate this year what we were going to do for homework and what that was and what students, how students valued it. And we really had to find a sweet spot that not only pleased, our teachers. Teacher buy-in is incredibly important. You don't want to impose this top down. So we had again, more and more conversations and organically came to the conclusion that homework did need a value. And parents needed to see that because it was coming home and correlating into more practice, which correlated into, so far, we've been doing this now, we're in our 10th, 11th week. Grades have been higher. I've actually received very few emails of concern. Matter of fact, none of concern about homework in particular. So again, the leap last year from not grading homework, having it, but not grading it, to this year having a lower level of accountability. And again, I promise I'm going to be getting to it. It's like the big teaser of how we actually did this. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was really promote this growth mindset amongst our students. Now, if you ask any kid in the halls, hey, do you feel like you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? They're not going to want to know the answer to that. They're going to say, hopefully, growth mindset. But how do you promote that in school actually comes directly from how you're assessing students. And so, we wanted to have mastery take precedence over judgment. We wanted students to feel that our goal for them was to learn, and there would certainly be struggles along the way, but at some point there does have to be an assessment. But how we did those assessments began to change. Now, again, we're just into this process this year, about 10 weeks. So far, it's been going well. We do have our struggles with it, but we wanted to create some intrinsic motivation amongst our students. And that was by sharing with them that we chose mastery over judgment. And then how we did that, which, yes, will involve things like retakes, will involve things like changing assessment titles, depending on how they may have done on part of it, which we'll get to soon. We wanted to create, like all of you do, we're in this because we love kids and we love education. We want our kids to be motivated. We want to create a love of learning, and we want kids to feel like they do have a safe place to fail. But if your grading system doesn't align with that, that's not the outcome that you're going to get. You may have teachers say all day long, we want you to feel safe here to fail. But if you don't put your money where your mouth is and back it up in a grading system, they're not going to feel that way, and neither are their parents. So when you think about retakes, for example, I always have the analogy of a pothole in the road. You know, your curriculum is going from A to Z, and you've got to get it done. Teachers' mindset of, hey, we really have to get this done. If I want my kids in algebra to fit into geometry, and on and on, so many great examples, we've got to move forward. But when you have a student who does poorly on an assessment, that really creates like a pothole in the road. Most schools would just leave that pothole and move on. Like, hey, it's your job. Make sure you figure this out. Here's your test. Try and get this, make this a little bit better. Maybe some test corrections. That's certainly one easy step that you can take. But oftentimes that knowledge, those kids are still busy. Like they moved on from one chapter to the next. The work is still there. They don't have time to double up. And so you've got to really think about, how do you fill that pothole? Because if you leave it over time, that knowledge is just going to be lost. That pothole is going to grow, and it's going to be a problem for a student later on down the road. So when you're really thinking in your mindset of how do we successfully create these cross-divisional connections, like preparing middle school kids for upper for college, you really have to address this. And it really came down for us to retakes, which again can be a logistical problem. There's only so much time a teacher has, and when do you schedule retakes, and what's the purpose of the retake? And for us, it was to allow students to remove that anxiety and pressure and understand that we chose mastery over judgment. And now you get a chance to take at least this part of this assessment, whether it was full or partial credit. You still want to give some teachers autonomy of that. And so it really has made a big difference in our students, where their anxiety levels are down. Our test grades are, for the most part, up. I've had, like I said, very few email concerns or meetings from parents, whether it was about homework or from grades. And our first quarter grades have already come out, so parents are well aware. We have an open grade book, like many of you, 24/7. Parents have access to that. And so, for us, it was really, really important to make sure that we addressed retakes with students to create that atmosphere of a safe place to fail. And without it, you're not really putting your money where your mouth is unless you allow that to happen. So, for example, one of the things that we would do is we would take an assessment that a student did, say it was a summative assessment, a large test, and say they did great on part of it. And this was actually a question on the HOVA app by a teacher, and then not so well in another part. So the teacher then had the ability to say, okay, well, what I'm going to do, and the freedom and flexibility for teachers is really important. I'm going to take this part and make it the summative assessment, which is worth more in the grade book. But then I'm going to take this one and make it a formative assessment, a lesser value, but still important, which also allows our students to take a retake, even for a certain amount of points or for full value. Because again, the end goal is mastery over judgment. And when you created that mindset, a couple things happen. You've just built in intrinsic motivation of a student that, hey, that I can do better. Like, I'm going to have a chance and I want to do better. My mom wants me to do better, my dad, my teachers. You've also taken away the will and desire and the anxiety of possibly cheating in a class. So when you give students that ability to say, look, hey, you didn't do so well, so here's what we're going to do. Here's another option for you to prove mastery to us. You're taking away that will and desire and slight panic, which causes most students to make that decision to cheat. And so far, it's been great. We've had really good results. We've had very, can I say, few or none discipline meetings or honor councils in our upper school for cheating or plagiarism or things of that nature. So the proof is in the pudding so far. It's been really good. So with that said, let's get to the meat of it. What time is it? We're at 11:29. And I forgot exactly, I have until 11:50. Oh, perfect. We got some good time here. So for us, our grading philosophy really had to change. And it was, this year was the epicenter of that change. We've been battling this for 4 years. We've made some decisions, good and bad, like homework, for example. We've tweaked things, but we really wanted to make a concerted effort across the divisions from lower, middle, and upper to create some consistency in a policy that did promote knowledge over judgment. And so for us, we basically boiled it down into three kind of flexible categories. So homework for us was dialed in at 10%. And it wasn't busy work. It was really built on weekly objectives, application of weekly objectives that you're learning in class. Homework does not happen every single night for our students in the middle or upper, even lower, obviously. But when it does happen, we want it to be intentional. We want it to be something that builds on the objectives of the class that you are working on that week, not just some random busy work. We're not grading it necessarily on effort. Again, that's something that bias we tried to move away from. We want it to be on applicable objectives of the lesson of that week worth 10%. Now with that, parents see homework coming home. Students see, hey, this is a value that can really help me, especially in grading. If you really look at the practical mindset of a student, how do I get an A? Homework is 10%. That has the ability to push a B to an A or C to a B. There's so many different scenarios you can go through. So that's been really well received. And again, it really kind of conforms to the idea of what AP was trying to do, of really proving mastery in a non-Googleable way on an assessment. You know, how can you prove mastery in that? The next one we chose was formative assessment, and formative assessment was worth 40%. Now our goal for formative assessments, which you may know better as smaller assessments like quizzes, or really was to have 12 formative assessments per quarter. And our quarters roughly run every 9 weeks-ish. Like any of you, your calendars vary a little bit. So formative was worth 40. Now, what's great about formative assessments is that's where we allow retakes to happen. Now, technically, a teacher could allow retakes on anything if they wanted to, but we try and guide formative as the place to go. And so in our previous example I'd given you, we had talked about how we take formative assessments, how we separate, say, a larger assessment like summative, which, by the way, is our final category. Summative is worth 50%. And our goal there, by the way, is 4 assessments. So let me go through these one more time. I should have put them on here. I do apologize. I didn't think about that. Homework was 10%. Formative was 40%. And then the larger summative assessments were 50%. So with those summatives, in a previous example I gave you, when a student takes it, they say they prove mastery on one part, but not the other. The teacher has the ability to separate those two and say, you know what, now I'm going to make this a summative assessment. And this part, which you didn't do so well on, is formative. And I'm going to allow you a retake option for a certain value. And it could be, depending on the teacher, again, I'm trying really hard not to take away that autonomy. I want teachers to feel like they're part of this process, so they get say in what it may be worth. But it is definitely always an option, and it definitely always has a value. How that is done can be up to the teacher, because they're the ones who are really going to be the ones juggling the logistics of that. But again, this approach really gives our students that safe place to fail, that they realize we've valued knowledge over judgment. Our goal is not to catch them in a moment of a lack of knowledge. And you know, for us, we also look at what our kids do every day. Like, some of our kids are going through, like so many of us in 2020, I know we're all counting the days, hoping 2021 will be better, but we're going through a lot. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety. You add COVID to the mix. You know, you add all the issues and concerns that heads of school and division leadership often see that sometimes teachers may not. Tomorrow, I'm actually doing a presentation on aspiring leaders for teachers who are interested in learning a little bit about my journey, and a few others about how they became a principal. One of the things we talk about is they're going through a lot. Some kids at home are going through a divorce. Some kids, death in the family. We've had a few over the last couple of years where a parent sadly passed away. They're busy, they're overbooked. You know, we have kids that when school ends for us, they have 3 different activities almost every day, plus homework when they get home. So you never really know what people are going through. And so when we're dealing with grading, we have to take that into effect as well, which is why the retake option on formative assessments is an absolute must for us, and something that has been really well received. So again, homework was 10%, formative 40, summative 50, but you have the ability as a teacher to take those assessments and change them. And with that formative retake option, again, you're motivating students and encouraging them that improving, you have a safe place to fail, and you're also taking away, I always think of high school with this, especially because it's a little more high stakes, that cheating option. It seems less like a valuable option to them. So speaking of high school, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And I'm sorry for my Days of Thunder analogy, but it's true, right? You know, in the end of the day, your high school transcript does take you to a place, hopefully, that you want to go. And as an independent school, some of us charge an exorbitant amount of money for that. And it's in a parent's perception, as someone who is an independent school parent as well, you want to make sure you're getting your money's worth. And so that transcript is incredibly important. Now, a lot of people will say, how do you prove, one of the questions that I had from Marcos Redondo, was one of our teachers here, was, you know, how do you prove rigor and still have a system like this? And so it really comes down to the idea that colleges see the final analysis of the grade of a GPA. And we all know, we've been in this game a while, colleges have their own GPA calculator as well. What schools have 100% control over is that grading system that proves mastery. And that's the end goal, right? I know mastery transcript has been something that people have talked about. We have been talking about it. We're not quite there yet. Again, this is an evolution that takes some time. But those are conversations we're having as well about what would that look like? How could we do that? What colleges are really buying into it? Until we evolve into that, and it is an evolution, you know, we think that this system we're creating, which again, it's in our infancy, but it's been very successful, is really helping students have that safe place to fail, have that option to prove mastery over judgment. And as a result of that, we have less anxiety, we have less cheating, and our parents and our student body overall are very happy with that. And parent perception and pressure is also a very real thing. So any of you who are an upper school principal, and I was there, you feel that, especially that junior, senior year, when it becomes really clear that this is real and your child will be applying and they will be judged by another institution based on the value of where they are at your independent school. And so that's why we wanted to help alleviate some of that pressure and focus on proving mastery over that kind of judgment. And I know I say that a lot because I really want to drive that home. And for us, it was, especially with our new upper school last year in our first graduating class, we really wanted to have what was called a two-prong attack. You know, the first prong was what we were doing in-house academically, you know, the grading equity, building a growth mindset, removing that anxiety or that desire to pressure to cheat through this very system that we're talking about. And then with our college counseling, and we do college counseling very differently here. We actually have outsourced our college counseling. That was actually a session I tried to have a conference about. I think we're one of the only schools that has truly outsourced college counseling to an outside agency. It's just down the road from us. It's called Quest for College Success. Very, very successful track record. And their efforts, you know, most college counseling departments have 2, 3, maybe 4 people, depending on your size. You know, they have a whole army in a building who wear one hat, and that one hat is to prepare you to get accepted to the university of whatever is the most important to you, and how to create a path that gets you there from your freshman year on. So the first prong, again, what we were doing in school, that grading equity that we were building up, and then college counseling efforts, which really where the rubber does meet the road. You know, your ACT and your SAT. If you're not looking at a test optional school like High Point University, one of our students actually went there. It was a test optional school, but that's a small percentage. Most of your kids will be applying to schools that will require and ask for an ACT or an SAT score. Those tests don't just magically appear overnight with high scores, especially here in Florida when you have Bright Futures, probably one of the most lucrative college financial aid programs in the country. As a parent of a student who is at FSU who got top tier Bright Futures, let me just say, that enables my Jeep Wrangler habit my wife doesn't think a lot about to really continue. So I'm very thankful for that. But again, college counseling effort, building those organizational skills, those study habits, SAT and ACT prep, college applications and essays for those who still require it. Believe it or not, essays are starting to fade out a little bit. Along with what we're doing with our grading equity program here, really was a great two-prong attack. And we're looking forward to seeing even more results this year with our second graduating class. I believe we're up to 16 or 17, so we're building it. It's going to be great. I'm really excited. Each one of these, though, really fuels each other to be successful. Okay, we're getting there. So how we landed so far, you know, how do we gauge success when you're doing all of this? And I love that picture on the top left of the dad really excited about school starting. Sadly, at the beginning of the year, many of our parents did not feel that euphoria as their kids just stayed home. We gauge success really using a myriad of tools to really get our constituents, our stakeholders, to really give us feedback on it. So the very first thing we did in the middle school in particular, we have grade level meetings every week, and we're sitting kids down, we're polling them, we're asking them, how do you feel about homework? Do you feel a lot of stress and anxiety? Our counselors are a big part of that. They're about to launch a survey to all of our students in the middle and upper and lower, I think too, at least in part, of how are we managing stress in our school? Is it good? You know, how are we doing in our grading? Do you feel really stressed out? Do you have too much homework? Those student polls are really important. As a matter of fact, as part of our teacher growth plan, which we call the TGP, it's our own system. It's not an evaluation system, that's very different. We have a teacher growth plan where this is part of that growth, which is surveying your students twice a year, one in the first semester, one in the second, about how they feel on a variety of different topics, whether it's how they feel about our grading categories, how they feel about a subject, how they feel about a teacher's attitude, level of homework. We ask the students a lot in this survey, and it's non-evaluative. There's no pressure or high stakes for our teachers. This is for their particular growth plan throughout the year. And we meet multiple times to really talk about that with each teacher. How can you use the value of this survey, the results that students said, to really improve your teaching? And that's vital. And our teachers are getting great feedback because of it. Parent coffees. You know, in the age of COVID, we're not allowed to have parents yet fully on campus. So we've been doing a lot of parent coffees, parent surveys, mostly parent coffees right now. The surveys are coming to gauge how the experience is going, either whether you're a distance learner or in-house. You know, how do you feel it's going? Do you feel the pressure of academics and grades? And the response so far has been great. We even involve our SGA, our student government, both in the middle and upper, in those particular conversations about how are things going, you know, how do you feel, just to gauge our level of success in this new grading equity program that we're launching. So we'll keep you posted for sure. Let's see. All right, so what happens now? So of course, this is an evolution. I've talked about that many times. It's going to take a lot of time. You know, our goal really is to hit these 5 key points and building a system that promotes that accuracy in student performance. You know, how are we really being accurate in evaluating students, that accuracy and that academic honesty? How are we removing bias and preventing that subjectivity from creeping into our grade book? Like, you know, Johnny brought a pencil, or so-and-so raised their hand, they participated more than Billy, so, you know, so-and-so gets more points. We're trying to remove that. And trust, of course, is a big thing. The message is we're not here to catch you in a moment of academic failure. We're here to help you along in this journey to learn and prove mastery. And that takes time to build up. And those retakes are a big part of that, actually. We want students to be intrinsically motivated. Just getting an A to get to college may not be enough. We want them to have a love of learning and take the fear out of it. And when you take that pressure off, even as a teacher, it gives you that time to be more motivated, to be more creative, and to get more involved. And of course, finally, a big thing in any independent school, especially if you're a preschool through 12th grade like us, I love that I can say through 12th grade now, you know, these cross-divisional connections are important. So when we start these grading challenges, we start them in the lower. In our 4th and 5th grade, we call it the intermediate pod. And then they move into the middle, and then they share the same categories in the upper. So this cross-divisional connection is incredibly important, and it eases the pressure that parents and students feel going from one division for another. So for us, it's our 5th to 6th grade, and then of course our 8th to 9th grade as well, because they've got confidence that, hey, this is, I've done this already. I've been here for a few years. I understand this grading system, and I understand summative, informative, and homework and retake options, and building that level of trust is incredibly important. And it also builds connections with faculty cross-divisionally as well. So the book right here, this journey started well before Joe Feldman's book came out last year, Grading for Equity. We were at NAIS just prior to the world of COVID falling apart. I believe it was February. I really can't remember. It seems so long ago. We were at the NAIS conference in Philly. I actually sat in Joe Feldman's session. It was masterful. The book is great, but there are many more books out there about grading. For those of you who have read some, please feel free to leave them in the chat so others can see it, especially as this is being recorded and I think shared. I do plan to upload this presentation, by the way, to the Hova app so that you can have it as needed. But the book was wonderful. It really dives into a lot of issues. I have just, in the 50 minutes that I have, scratched the surface on some of the things that Joe was talking about. So fantastic book, but again, there are others. But the centerpiece of it is really removing that bias and focusing on mastery over judgment. And if you guys can start that conversation and process, I think you're going to be on a great track. And finally, if you do want to reach out to me, that's my personal email address. I can also share my TBS email address with you as well. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. I'm there as well to connect and ask more questions, or if you want more additional information, I would love to, if you want to just get together a one-on-one if you're not local, and do a Zoom or a Google Meet meeting. I would love to share more about our journey as it unfolds with all of you. So at this time, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen and kind of look at the questions really quickly, because I haven't had a chance to see it. When I hear all teachers have 3 categories: homework, formative, and yes. Then do they add subcategories, or do all teachers stick with these 3? We are asking them to stick with those 3 categories. There are some special teachers out there. When you talk about, for example, drama or our music program, where they're performing, that may be a little bit different, but overall 99% of our teachers follow those 3 categories, and every assessment will fall into one. But again, remember, you can take one and change it. You can create a formative assessment, a summative rather, and then all of a sudden take half of it and say, half will be summative, the other half formative. Same thing with homework. You have a formative assessment and they're like, oh gosh, they didn't do that well. Let's make that a homework grade. You can maybe do some retakes for that. And then let's do another formative later on to see if we've gained that knowledge. So flexibility is super important. Brandy asked, I'm not sure if you hit upon this, but if anyone is wanting to start looking at standard-based grading in the book, Fair Isn't Always Equal, absolutely another fantastic book. Highly recommend it. There's more than one grade option out there. So again, I just wanted to say, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Put it in your calendar to reach out to me in another 6-7 weeks. And I'd be happy to share our journey with you of how things are going. Again, evolutionary process, but one that I think is really important for all of us who really want to create a quality, safe environment for our kids to feel like mastery is the objective here, not necessarily judgment. One last question: how did you use retakes effectively so that it didn't become a crutch for students? Again, we left a lot of this up to the teachers to have that autonomy to figure out, you know, how can I use retakes? And if we see a student who's maybe trying to abuse that option, that's when we actually have a really bigger conversation with the student and their parents about academics and where this student is struggling to try and use that system in a different way. Again, this is a partnership. It's not something that we're doing on our own. Parents are a very large part of it. Okay, well, again, thank you all so much for being here. I took us to the last minute. I can't see any particular other questions. Feel free to email me. Let me know if you want any more information. I appreciate all of you taking the time to be here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual conference. Until then, I'm Jason Saint Amon, and I'll see you later.